Hey, so tonight we're going to talk about what everyday life was really like in medieval Britain. And trust me, by the time we're done here, you're going to be so grateful for that mattress under you, those clean sheets, that roof over your head that doesn't leak. We're talking about a time when 80% of people were peasants. 80%. Think about that for a second. Oh, and if you're enjoying these stories, I'd really appreciate a like or subscribe. Super curious where you're all listening from, so drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. Always blows my mind how people are falling asleep to this all over the world. All right, find that cozy spot. Take a nice, slow breath, and just let your body sink into whatever you're lying on. We're heading back to medieval Britain somewhere around the 1300s. So congratulations, you just woke up in medieval Britain. The first thing you notice isn't what you see, it's what you smell. Smoke. Thick, choking wood smoke that makes your eyes water. It's seeping down from the hole in the thatch roof above you, where yesterday's fire still smoulders in the centre of your one-room cottage. The air is heavy with it, dense. You're lying on a thin straw mattress that's more lumps than comfort. The straw pokes through the coarse linen ticking, jabbing into your back and shoulders. It crackles when you move. Underneath it, you can feel the hard-packed earth floor, cold and unforgiving. The mattress does almost nothing to cushion you from it. Your covering is a rough wool blanket, scratchy against your skin. It smells of sheep and smoke and, well, you. Bathing isn't exactly a weekly thing here. The wool is thick but drafty. Cold air slips through gaps where the weaving isn't tight. One corner is damp from where rain dripped through the thatch last night. You shift slightly, trying to find a more comfortable position. Better. That's a bit better. The cottage is dim. No windows, just gaps in the wattle and daub walls that let in slivers of grey morning light. Wattle and daub, basically woven sticks plastered with mud and cow dung. The walls are thin, maybe 3 inches thick. You can hear wind whistling through the cracks. In winter, those cracks let in snow. Right now, they're just letting in the sound of your neighbour's rooster and the distant lowing of cattle. Speaking of cattle, there's snuffling and shuffling from the other end of your cottage. Your ox, your 2 sheep, and that one scraggly chicken that somehow survived the winter are all sharing this space with you. The smell hits you. Animal sweat, manure, wet straw. It's pungent. Really pungent, but these animals, they're keeping you alive. The ox pulls your plough, the sheep give you wool to trade, the chicken gives you eggs when she feels like it. Your family is still asleep around you. Medieval families didn't sleep alone. Privacy wasn't really a thing yet. Your wife is next to you, your 3 surviving children arranged by age, youngest closest to their mother. Everyone's huddled together for warmth. Shared body heat is sometimes the difference between making it through the night or not. You yawn, a big, satisfying yawn that stretches your jaw. Your muscles are already aching. Yesterday was spent behind the plough, walking those long furrows in the Lord's field. Today will be more of the same, but first you've got to get that fire going properly. The fire pit in the centre of the room is just glowing coals now. You can see your breath in the cold air. You need to get some kindling on those coals, get some flames going, warm the place up, and you need to do it before the smoke gets any thicker. The hole in the roof above helps, but not much. Sometimes you wonder if the smoke is trying to kill you faster than the cold. Here's the thing about being a peasant in medieval Britain, and this is going to sound weird, but you're not necessarily poor. Well, okay, you are poor by our standards, but there are different kinds of peasants. Some peasants, believe it or not, are doing pretty well for themselves. You, for instance, you're what they call a villain. You're semi-free. You rent land from the lord of the manor, and yeah, you can't just pack up and leave whenever you want, but you're not exactly a slave either. You've got some rights. The lord can't just kick you off your land. It's yours, as long as you pay your rent and work his fields when he needs you to. Now your neighbour down the way, he's a serf, poor bastard. He's basically tied to the land like property. If the Lord sells the manor, he sells the serf with it. But here's the weird thing. Even the serf has some security. The Lord can't kick him out either. Strange system. But there you go. And then there are the free peasants. Lucky bastards can go wherever they want, work for whoever pays best. Some of them are actually getting rich, really rich, especially if they're in the wool trade. See, here's what's happening in medieval Britain that's actually pretty amazing. There are all these new technologies coming in, stuff the Romans never figured out. The heavy plough, for instance. This thing can slice through the thick, clay-heavy soil of northern Europe like nobody's business. Before this, you basically couldn't farm half the land here. Too heavy, too thick. Now you can feed way more people. You stretch, feeling your back pop, your shoulders drop, releasing some of that tension from yesterday's work. Nice and easy. There's also this thing called the three-field system. Brilliant, really. Instead of just farming the same crops over and over until you suck all the nutrients out of the soil, you rotate. One year you grow wheat or barley, crops that pull nitrogen out of the soil. Next year, you let that field rest, go fallow. Third year, you plant something like alfalfa or beans that puts nitrogen back into the soil. Then you start the cycle over. It means you can actually farm more land more efficiently, feed more people, which is good because there are a lot more people to feed these days. And then there's the horse collar. Sounds boring, but this thing changed everything. Used to be you had to use oxen to pull your plough. Oxen are strong, sure, but they're slow as hell. Horses are much faster, but if you try to make a horse pull a heavy plough with the wrong kind of harness, you'll choke the poor thing to death. The horse collar fixes that. Now horses can pull ploughs without suffocating. They're faster than oxen, so you can plough more land in less time. They're useful for other stuff too. Transportation, hauling goods to market, multi-purpose animals, very efficient. You want to get a comfortable yawn and settle a bit deeper into your straw mattress. It's not so bad really once you find the right position. These innovations, they're making life better for peasants. Well, some peasants. If you're smart about it, if you work hard, if you get a little lucky, you can actually improve your situation. Take the Collins family, for example. Thomas Collins, he's a peasant just like you, but by the 1270s he's doing really well for himself, really well. He owns about 15 acres of land, which is a lot for a peasant. He's got cattle, sheep, geese, especially geese, because rich people love eating goose at Christmas. So, there's good money in geese. His wife brews ale, which she sells at market. They're basically what you'd call middle class, if that concept existed yet. Thomas isn't just getting by, he's actually respected in his community. People come to him when they need someone to vouch for them, to be a pledge. If someone owes money and they say they're good for it, Thomas will say, "Yeah, I know this guy. He's trustworthy. I'll put up my land as security." That's a big deal. That means people trust you. That means you've got something to lose. But here's the thing about medieval life. It can all change really fast. One bad harvest, one sick animal, one stupid decision, and everything you've built can crumble. The fire pops and crackles in the centre of the room. The smoke shifts, and for a moment you can breathe easier. Your breathing naturally slows. In and out. That's better. See, around 1282, we lose track of Thomas Collins in the records for about 10 years. When he shows up again in 1292, his luck has turned bad, really bad. This guy who used to be well respected, who used to have people coming to him for help, now he's the one who needs help. He owes money. A lot of money, 5 shillings to a guy named Walter from Oldbury. 5 shillings might not sound like much, but for Thomas, it's a crisis. He can't pay it back. He's already mortgaged his crops, basically promised his entire harvest to someone else to pay off other debts. He's stuck. So, what does he do? He has to sell his land. But here's the catch. He doesn't actually own his land. He's a serf, remember. The abbey owns the land, so he can only sell it to the abbey, and the abbey knows he's desperate, so they're not exactly going to give him top dollar for it. They give him £2. It's enough to pay off Walter and his other debts, but now Thomas is in real trouble. He's got 9 mouths to feed, him, his wife and 7 children, and he's just lost most of his income. All he's got left is the land his wife brought into the marriage as her dowry. And here's something interesting. Even in medieval times, women had some property rights. The land that came with his wife as part of her dowry, that's still hers. Thomas can't sell it without her permission. It's not much, but it's something. Your wife stirs beside you, mumbling something in her sleep. You listen to her breathing, slow and steady, peaceful. The children are still fast asleep, bundled together like puppies. Thomas tries to make it work, he really does, but by the time he dies in 1312, he's massively in debt again. His land goes to his wife and daughters. 2 of the daughters have managed to get married, which is good for them. Marriage means security, someone to take care of them, but that leaves 6 women who need to support themselves somehow. By 1319, all the Collins sisters are gone, just vanished from the records. We don't know if they moved away looking for better opportunities or if something worse happened to them. See, from 1317 to 1319, there was this disaster called the Great Famine. The name pretty much tells you everything you need to know. There just wasn't enough food to go around. The medieval warm period, this stretch of time from about 900 to 1300, when the weather was actually really good for farming, that was ending. Winters were getting longer and colder. Summers were getting shorter and rainier. Crops were failing. People were starving. A lot of people. The Collins sisters might have been among them. You shift again, getting more comfortable as the story continues. The straw rustles beneath you, but you barely notice anymore. You're settling in, getting cozy. This is the reality of medieval life. It's not all knights and castles and romantic nonsense. It's ordinary people trying to make a living, trying to feed their families, trying to survive in a world that can be pretty brutal. Most people, 80% of people, are peasants. They're the ones doing the actual work that keeps society functioning. They're growing the food that feeds everyone. They're raising the animals. They're making the cloth, brewing the ale, building the houses. Everything depends on them, but they're also the ones who have the least control over their own lives. You can't just decide you don't like your lord and move somewhere else. You can't just say, I'm tired of farming, I think I'll become a merchant. Your life is tied to the land, and the land is controlled by someone else. Someone who's never held a plough, never planted a seed, never spent 14 hours a day in the fields. And yet there are opportunities, real opportunities, if you're smart, if you work hard, if you specialise in something people need. Brewing, for instance, weaving, the wool trade. England is becoming a major player in the international wool trade. There's this thing called the Hanseatic League, a network of trading cities around the North Sea and Baltic Sea that trade in wool and cloth. English wool is some of the best in the world. Sheep produce this miracle fibre that stays warm even when it's wet. That's not nothing when you live in a place where it rains 9 months out of the year. A comfortable sigh escapes as you think about the sheep in the corner of your cottage. Even their assets, even they represent opportunity. If you're a peasant with enough land to graze sheep, if you know how to breed them properly, if you can get your wool to market, you can make good money. Really good money. Some peasants are getting rich off the wool trade. Rich enough to buy better houses, better land, better lives for their children. But you've got to be careful. You've got to be smart, because the same system that can lift you up can crush you just as easily. The fire settles with a soft whoosh. The smoke drifts lazily upward, and you watch it disappear through the hole in the roof. Your eyelids feel heavy. Not sleepy exactly, just relaxed, comfortable. The church wants its cut of everything. 10% of everything you produce goes to the church as tithe. Doesn't matter if you barely have enough to feed your family. Doesn't matter if the harvest was bad. 10%, no exceptions. And then there's your Lord. You owe him labour, you owe him rent, you owe him a share of your crops, and if he decides he needs more, well, that's just too bad for you. This is the world you've woken up in. This is medieval Britain. It's a world where 80% of people live like this, in one-room cottages, sharing space with animals, working land they don't own for people who've never worked a day in their lives. But it's also a world on the verge of change, big change. The Black Death is coming. Well, it already came about 30 years ago, and it killed a third of the population. A third. Imagine that. 1 out of every 3 people you know, dead within a few years. But here's the weird thing about the Black Death. For the peasants who survived, it was actually kind of good news. Suddenly there weren't enough people to work the land. Suddenly peasants had leverage. If you didn't like the deal your lord was offering, you could go work for someone else who would pay you better. The government tried to stop this, of course. They passed laws saying peasants couldn't demand higher wages, couldn't move around looking for better work. But laws are one thing, reality is another. If there's only half as many workers as you need, you're going to pay whatever it takes to get the work done. Your muscles relax as you shift position, finding that perfect spot where the straw doesn't poke quite so much. The animal sounds from the other end of the cottage are comforting now, familiar, safe. So now we're in this interesting period where peasants are starting to realise they have power. Real power. They're the ones doing the work. They're the ones creating the wealth, and they're starting to ask questions. Why should they give half their crops to some lord who's never held a plough? Why should they work for free on the lord's land when they could be working their own? Why should they be tied to one place when there are opportunities elsewhere? These are dangerous questions. The kind of questions that make the people in charge very nervous. And there's this priest, John Ball, who's been going around giving sermons that make the authorities even more nervous. He's asking questions like, when Adam delved and Eve span, who was then the gentleman? Think about that for a second. Adam and Eve didn't have nobles and peasants. They were just people. So where did all this hierarchy come from? Who decided that some people should be born to wealth and power while others should be born to serve? These are the kind of ideas that can start revolutions. You yawn again, a deep, satisfying yawn. The warmth from the fire is starting to reach you now, taking the edge off the morning chill. Your breathing slows and deepens. The thing is, medieval society depends on peasants not asking these questions. It depends on everyone accepting that this is just the way things are, the way God intended them to be. Nobles fight, priests pray, peasants work. Everyone has their place, their role, their station in life. But what happens when the peasants start to think maybe they deserve better? What happens when they realise they outnumber the nobles and priests by about 50 to 1? What happens when they decide they've had enough? Well, you're about to find out. Because it's 1381 now, and a tax collector just showed up in the village of Fobbing in Essex, demanding to know why the people there haven't paid their poll tax. This is a new tax, 4 pence from every adult, whether they're rich or poor. 4 pence might not sound like much, but when you're barely making enough to feed your family, 4 pence is a lot of money. The people of Fobbing have had enough. They've had enough of taxes, enough of lords, enough of being told they owe money to a government that's never done anything for them except take their food and their children for some war in France they don't understand and don't care about. So they throw the tax collector out. Just grab him and toss him out of town. Come back when you've got something useful to offer, they basically tell him. The government is not amused. They send soldiers to restore order, but the people of Fobbing do the same thing to the soldiers. Out they go, and word spreads, fast, village to village, county to county. People are saying no, people are standing up, people are refusing to pay. You stretch, feeling your back pop again. Your shoulders settle. The tension in your neck melts away. Nice and easy. That's it. This is where our story really starts, not with knights or castles or kings, but with ordinary people like you, lying on straw mattresses in smoky cottages, deciding they've had enough, deciding they deserve better, deciding they're willing to fight for it, because what's about to happen will shake medieval England to its core. It'll bring peasants from all over the country marching on London. It'll put them face to face with the king himself. It'll change everything. Or at least, it'll try to. But first, you've got to get through another day of being a medieval peasant. You've got to get that fire going, feed those animals, work those fields. You've got to survive in a world that doesn't care whether you live or die, as long as the crops get planted and the rent gets paid. You shift a bit more, getting comfortable, muscles relaxing, as the morning light grows stronger and the sounds of the village waking up drift through the thin walls of your cottage. So you drag yourself up from that straw mattress, bare feet hitting the cold earth floor. The shock of it wakes you up fast. Medieval Britain doesn't believe in easing into your day. It's cold, it's harsh, and it's immediate. Your first job is getting that fire going properly. You crouch down by the fire pit, blowing gently on the coals until they glow brighter. Add some dry grass, some twigs, watch the flames catch and grow. Smoke billows up, making your eyes water, but at least it's warm smoke. The animals are stirring now too. Your ox looks at you with those big patient eyes that seem to say, well, are we working today or what? The sheep are huddled together, their wool thick and greasy to the touch. That wool, by the way, is worth more than you might think. Good English wool can fetch serious money at market if you know how to get it there. You step outside to piss and the morning air hits you like a slap. It's spring, but spring in medieval Britain is still cold, still wet, still miserable half the time. The sun is just starting to break through the clouds, casting long shadows across the field strips. And that's what you see stretching out in front of you. Not neat square fields like we have today, but long, narrow strips. Your strips scattered across the village's 3 big fields. This is the open field system, and it's how pretty much everyone farms in medieval England. See, the lord of the manor doesn't divide up his land into nice, tidy farms for each peasant family. Instead, he's got 3 huge fields, and each peasant family gets strips scattered throughout all 3. Your neighbour might have the strip right next to yours in one field, but his other strips could be on the complete opposite side of the village. Sounds inefficient, right? Well, it's actually pretty smart. If one part of the village has better soil, or gets more rain, or doesn't flood as badly, everyone gets a piece of it. Spreads the risk around. If your strip next to the river gets washed out in a flood, well, you've still got strips on higher ground. You stretch, feeling your muscles wake up slowly. A yawn escapes. The morning is quiet except for the sounds of other families starting their day. Roosters crowing, pigs snorting, the distant sound of someone chopping wood. Today, you're working the Lord's land. That's how this whole system works. You don't just rent your strips, you owe labour to the Lord. A certain number of days per week, you work his land for free, plant his crops, harvest his grain, repair his fences. Only after you've done your work for him can you work your own strips. It's called corvée labour, and yeah, it's exactly as fun as it sounds. Free work for someone else while your own crops wait. But here's the thing that's starting to change in the late 1300s. There aren't enough people anymore to make this system work smoothly. The Black Death killed so many people that lords are getting desperate for workers. Some of them are starting to offer actual wages instead of just demanding free labour. Some are letting peasants pay money rent instead of working the Lord's land. And some peasants are saying, you know what, I think I'll go work for the lord down the road who's offering better terms, which technically they're not supposed to be able to do. Villeins and serfs are tied to the land, but when half the population is dead and you need to get your crops planted. You start to get flexible about the rules. You head back inside to grab some bread and ale for breakfast. The bread is dense, dark, made from barley and rye with maybe a little wheat if you've been lucky. It's not fluffy white bread, it's heavy, chewy stuff that fills your stomach and gives you the energy to work 14-hour days. You dip it in the ale to soften it up. Medieval ale is weak, safer to drink than water, and it's got calories you need. Your wife is up now, getting the children moving. Medieval families don't have the luxury of sleeping in. Work starts early and ends late, especially during planting and harvest seasons. The children old enough to work will come with you to the fields. The youngest will stay with their mother, who's got her own work to do, tending the vegetable garden, feeding the chickens, maybe doing some weaving or brewing. Yeah, brewing. That's actually women's work in medieval England, and it can be profitable. Good ale is always in demand, and if your wife has a reputation for brewing strong, tasty ale, people will pay extra for it. It's one of those cottage industries that can actually make the difference between just surviving and getting ahead. You shift your weight, settling deeper into the rhythm of the story. Your breathing naturally slows as you listen. The walk to the Lord's Field takes you through the village, and you can see other families starting their day, smoke rising from thatch roofs, dogs barking, children running around with energy you remember having once upon a time. The village priest is up early too, heading toward the church for morning prayers. He waves at you, and you wave back. The relationship between peasants and the church is complicated. On one hand, the church takes that 10% tithe whether you can afford it or not. On the other hand, the priest is often the only person in the village who can read and write. He's the one who keeps track of births and deaths, who settles disputes, who provides what little medical care there is. And lately, some priests have been saying things that make the authorities nervous. Things about equality, about how God loves all people the same, about how maybe the social order isn't as fixed as everyone pretends it is. You reach the Lord's Field and see other peasants already at work. There's a rhythm to this work that's as old as farming itself. The ox is hitched to the heavy plough and you guide it down the long furrows, turning over the heavy clay soil that would have been impossible to farm before the heavy plough was invented. The plough bites deep, cutting through the earth with that satisfying resistance that tells you you're doing real work. The ox plods along steadily, patient and strong. Behind you, the earth lies open and dark, ready for seed. This is actually skilled work, you know. Guiding a plough isn't just a matter of walking behind it and hoping for the best. You have to know how deep to cut, how to handle the plough when you hit rocks or roots, how to keep the furrows straight and even. You have to understand your ox, know when to push and when to let up. You have to read the soil, the weather, the season. But does anyone acknowledge this skill? Do the nobles who live off your work understand what it takes to coax food from the earth? Of course not. To them, you're just another piece of equipment, like the plough or the ox. A comfortable sigh escapes as you imagine the rhythm of the work, the steady back and forth across the field. The sun climbs higher, and you settle into the meditative rhythm of ploughing. Step, step, step behind the ox. Watch the furrow open up, turn at the end of the field, start another row. Your muscles warm up, find their groove. This is what your body was built for. Not sitting at desks or staring at screens, but real physical work under the open sky. Around midday, you break for food. More bread, more ale, maybe some cheese if you're lucky. You sit in the shade of a hedgerow with the other peasants, and the talk turns to what it always turns to these days. Taxes. The poll tax is just the latest insult. 4 pence from every adult, rich or poor. A lord who owns half the county pays the same 4 pence as a peasant who can barely afford shoes. How is that fair? How is that just? Heard they threw the tax collector out of fobbing, one of the other peasants says, keeping his voice low. Just grabbed him and tossed him right out of town. Good for them, another one mutters. About time someone stood up to these bastards. You listen to this talk and you can feel something in the air, a tension, an anger that's been building for years and is finally starting to boil over. People are tired of being squeezed, tired of working harder for less, tired of watching their children go hungry while the Lord's family feast in their great hall. But there's also fear. Fear of what happens if you get caught talking like this. Fear of what happens if you're labelled a troublemaker. The Lord has the power to make your life hell if he wants to. He can evict you, take your animals, destroy everything you've worked for. Still, the talk continues. Quietly, carefully, but it continues. After the break, it's back to work. More ploughing, more walking behind the ox, more turning over the earth. The afternoon stretches long and hot. Your back aches, your legs are tired, but you keep going because that's what peasants do. You keep going. Your shoulders drop, releasing tension as you think about the simple rhythm of the work, the satisfaction of preparing the earth for new life. As the sun starts to get lower, you unhitch the ox and head back toward the village. The day's work on the Lord's land is done. Tomorrow you'll work your own strips, but today belonged to him. On the way back, you pass by the big barn that belongs to the abbey. It's huge, impressive, built of stone that will last for centuries. Inside, it houses the grain and animals that belong to the monks. The monks who spend their days praying for everyone's souls, including yours. You've never been inside that abbey, by the way, despite the fact that your labour helps pay for it, despite the fact that you give them 10% of everything you produce, you'll never see the inside. That's for monks and nobles, not for peasants. You can look at the great stone walls from the outside, but that's as close as you get. It's a reminder of how this world works. You create the wealth, but you don't get to enjoy it. You grow the food, but you don't get to eat the best of it. You build the buildings, but you don't get to live in them. And lately, more and more people are starting to ask, why? Back in your cottage, your wife has kept the fire going and prepared the evening meal. More bread, maybe some pottage, a thick stew made from whatever vegetables you've got, maybe a little meat if you're lucky. You eat by firelight, smoke still drifting up through the hole in the roof. The children tell you about their day. The older ones helped with the planting, the younger ones watched the animals, made sure they didn't wander off. Everyone contributes in a peasant family. Everyone has to. After the meal, there's still work to do. Tools to repair, animals to tend, preparations for tomorrow. Medieval peasants don't really have leisure time the way we think of it. When you're not working the land, you're doing something else that needs doing. But as the evening grows darker and the fire burns lower, there's time to talk. Time to share news from other villages, other counties. And the news these days is all about resistance. People refusing to pay taxes, villages throwing out government officials, peasants demanding better wages, better treatment, better lives for their children. There's a preacher named John Ball who's been going around giving sermons about equality, about how God created all people equal, how the differences between nobles and peasants are man-made, not God-made. Dangerous ideas, the kind of ideas that get you arrested. But they're spreading anyway, village to village, person to person, like seeds carried on the wind. You settle back against the wall, feeling the rough wattle and daub against your shoulders. The fire crackles softly, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Your wife mentions that she heard John Ball was in the next village over just last week. Drew a crowd of hundreds, they say, people walking miles just to hear him speak. And what he said was this: when Adam delved and Eve span, who was then the gentleman? Think about that. Adam and Eve, the first humans according to the Bible. They worked the earth with their own hands. They spun their own cloth. They didn't have servants, didn't have peasants working for them. They were workers themselves. So when did it all change? When did some people decide they were too good to work, too important to get their hands dirty? When did nobles and bishops and lords decide that other people should do all the work while they lived in luxury? These are revolutionary questions, questions that challenge the entire structure of medieval society, questions that suggest maybe, just maybe, things don't have to be the way they've always been. Your breathing slows, natural and easy, as the fire burns lower and the cottage grows quieter. The word is spreading that something big is being planned, not just scattered resistance, not just individual villages throwing out tax collectors, something coordinated, something that could actually change things. They say peasants from all over Essex and Kent are talking to each other, sharing information, making plans. They say there's going to be a march on London, a gathering so big that even the king will have to listen. And the name people keep mentioning is Wat Tyler, a man from Kent who's supposedly organising this whole thing. Nobody knows much about him. Some say he's a roof tiler, others say he fought in France as a soldier, but everyone agrees he's got the kind of presence that makes people want to follow him. Tyler's message is simple. Peasants deserve better. They deserve fair wages, fair treatment, freedom to move and work where they choose. They deserve to be treated like human beings instead of property. It's not a complicated message, but it's a powerful one, especially when you're lying on a straw mattress in a smoky cottage, aching from a day of free labour for someone who's never held a plough. You shift position, getting more comfortable as the story flows around you like warm water. The children are asleep now, curled up together for warmth. Your wife is mending clothes by the firelight, her needle moving in steady, practiced strokes. This is how peasant evenings end, with quiet work, quiet conversation, quiet preparation for tomorrow's labour. But tonight feels different. Tonight there's an electricity in the air, a sense that change is coming whether the nobles want it or not. Tonight you can almost imagine a world where peasants have rights, where workers get fair wages, where people aren't tied to the land like cattle. It's a dangerous dream, the kind of dream that can get you killed if the wrong people hear about it. But it's also a powerful dream, and it's spreading faster than anyone imagined. Outside, the wind picks up, rattling the thatch above your head. Somewhere in the distance, you can hear the sound of horses on the road. Maybe it's just travellers, or maybe it's messengers carrying word of the growing resistance from village to village. Either way, you pull your wool blanket tighter and listen to the night sounds of medieval Britain, the sounds of a world on the edge of something big, something unprecedented, something that could change everything. Your muscles relax completely now, sinking into the rhythm of breath and heartbeat and the soft crackling of the dying fire as the cottage settles into the quiet that comes before the storm. The morning comes too soon, like it always does when you're a peasant. But today feels different. There's a buzz in the air, voices carrying across the village fields before dawn. Something's happening. You stumble outside to see what the commotion is about, and there's your neighbour, practically bouncing with excitement. "They did it," he says, grinning. "The bastards actually did it." Did what? Essex, the whole bloody county's in revolt, threw out the tax collectors, chased off the soldiers, the whole lot, and it's spreading. Kent's joining in, Suffolk too. You feel your heart